guys, Work here. Welcome back to the bench. Today we're going to be doing a quick and simple trigger job on my CZ P10C. Currently I've got the Suarez face shooter in here. We're going to be replacing this with the new Overwatch unit. Let's get to it. Now the Overwatch unit for our P10 here comes with a new trigger shoe as well as an MP3 coated striker. The MP3 coated striker is what's going to give us a really super nice crisp light trigger pull while keeping the same geometries in the trigger that are going to keep us 100% drop safe. First up, as always, let's check to make sure the firearm is clear. Go ahead and take it down by pulling the trigger, pulling it slightly back, pulling down on our takedown tabs, and pressing the slide off. We're going to put this to the side to get to it in just a minute. First up, let's go ahead and remove our takedown plate. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to push our T-block down here, down, while simultaneously pulling over on our takedown plate here. We'll just kind of wiggle that guy out. He doesn't always like to come out very easily, and sometimes it helps to get a little bit of pressure from the other side. There we go. Okay, so there's our T-block. Now notice on the slide catch, this hook section right here, you can see this hook right here, is going to go facing towards the back of the firearm. So let's go ahead and set that aside. Next thing, go ahead and turn it upside down and dump the T-block out. Okay, there's our T-block. Sit that to the side. That can only really go in one way. There is a spring that's seated inside that. Okay, next up we need to start taking pins out. So we're going to start up here with this pin, then we're going to work our way back. Go ahead and grab a punch and start punching. All right, there's that front pin out. Go ahead and sit that to the side. Now I'm going to sit these pins in order that I took them out on. Next up's this pin. This one's actually quite a bit easier to get out of there because this one just presses out. Okay. So there's that pin. Give it a little bit of a tap to get it past the spring that sits on both of these little notches here. Then we got to get these two. Again, we're going to grab our roll pin punch and we're going to get them out. There's one. This back one never likes to come out very easy. Especially when you're driving it down into your block. There we go. Okay, and out with the second one. Let's go ahead and sit that to the side. So I've got all my pins up here in order. Now we can go ahead and pull, here's that main front section, pull that out. And now we can just lift up on the ejector and pull that entire back section out. Now we can go ahead and push this pin out right here. That pin just falls right out and it relieves our trigger, which we can now sit to the side. Now we can grab our Overwatch trigger. Let's clean this up just a little bit. This is one of those situations where you just clean it up while you're in here. Okay, let's go ahead and get our Overwatch unit in here. So let's go ahead and flip it over and press our pin in from this side here. Just gonna drop that pin right down into that hole. There we go. Make sure that pin is flush on both sides before we can put this whole unit back into our firearm. Okay, get that back lined up. We can take our slide release slide catch, drop it back in as well. And now we can stick some pins back in. So first up, I'm going to start with my trigger pin right here. This pin is just usually the one that kind of lines everything up. So I'm going to go ahead and get things lined up. You'll have to end up pressing down on your front block here as well as moving the trigger into its spot. So this is really definitely a 100% two-hand job. So I push the trigger into its spot with this finger, hold the block down with this hand, and then line everything up. As soon as I get it lined up, I can drop this pin in and down through. There we go. Okay, so now we've got our Overwatch trigger shoe in and a very dirty gun. Now we can go ahead and finish putting the rest of the pins in. Those are all going to go in from this left-hand side here. So let's go ahead and start from the back, actually. Tap these back in, making sure that everything is lined up because I have made the mistake before of not having these fully lined up. Get our roll pin punch on there. Okay, And that one's in. Make sure it's flush on both sides. Do the next one. Again, making sure that our holes are lined up. This one goes in nice and easy. Again, making sure they're flush on both sides. And last is this front one. This front one is usually the one that's kind of a pain in the butt to make sure that you get it all the way in. So, go ahead and get that one punched all the way in. One more. Okay. So now that one's punched all the way in. Now all we have to do is put our little T-block here back in. Now, remember, this T-block's got this spring here, and this spring is not captured. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a little bit of grease. And I'm going to put just a dab of grease down inside our hole. And what that's going to do is now when I put that spring down in, it's not going to fall out. So let's go ahead and put this down in this hole. There's only one direction that it can go in, so go ahead and stick with the direction that it goes in. Okay. Now we just need to put our slide stop back on. Remember, this little hook section is going to be facing towards the back. So that in, you're going to push it in about that far. Grab a small punch, push down your T-block, and get that takedown lever back in. And that is it for the frame. Let's go ahead and wipe it down really quick before we go on to the slide, which is our next portion of this particular one, because this kit, as I said, comes with a new striker. Next up, we got to do the striker assembly on our slide here. So let's go ahead and take down the barrel. Now this is a Norso slide. However, the slides are the same. You can get 5% off of a Norso order with the coupon code Work the Trigger. So what we got to do is we need to pull back a little bit on this housing here. So you can see right in here, I can get my 90-degree pick, just shove it right in there and pull forward on it. That's going to give you the leeway that you need to be able to pull off the back plate, and then the entire striker assembly will slide right out the back. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to compress the spring so that we can pull the spring keeper off, which is up here. So as I pull back on the spring, okay, so I'm going to use one hand to pull back on the spring. This is not an easy job, mind you. And then the keepers just peel right off. So now the spring is going to go forward and out. I can take the spring all the way off, and then my striker slides right out the back of my assembly here. So I'm going to leave it in this orientation right now while I get out my new striker. So this is what we're going to be looking at as far as removing the striker. So the old one is going to come out. The new one is going to go in at the exact same angle. Okay. Next up, we reinstall our spring. And this is the really fun part, because we have to get this compressed without the striker falling back down into our striker assembly here to get those keepers on. So what I like to do is I like to grab a punch that's about the same diameter, so I can hold onto the punch. I can pull the striker assembly onto the punch. So essentially what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be pulling this spring down while holding this striker assembly onto the punch, which is going to allow me to compress without my striker assembly falling backwards. Now I can pull it the rest of the way down, putting pressure on this punch that's down in here. And you can see that I can see clearly my striker assembly, or my striker. Now I can put my keepers back in, one at a time, 180 degrees away from each other. And as I release, there we go. So that's the quickest way to be able to replace a striker on here. You just got to get that punch in there to be able to keep the striker itself up towards the front of this striker assembly. And that's pretty much it as far as that goes. That's it for the entire installation of this. Now we just got to put this back in our slide, which is as easy as this. All right, now all we got to do is pretty much the opposite of what we did before. We got to get our 90 degree in here, pull this entire assembly forward, making sure that it's compressed, toss on our back plate, and that's it for our striker install. Now we can go ahead and put our barrel and recoil spring back in. This is a primary machine recoil guide rod and a 15-pound spring. Now we can get that back all onto the gun. And now we've got our new Overwatch trigger on our CZ P10. You can see that we have complete drop safety. You can't, it's hard for you guys to see it, but the dongle is in there, blocking that trigger from going back. And the nice thing that I really like about the Overwatch trigger is when you put your finger on that trigger, the dongle itself actually goes flush with the face. That was one of my problems with this Suarez trigger here, was the dongle doesn't go flush with the face. I don't know if you can see that, it does stick out, and you can definitely feel that. Well, the Overwatch unit doesn't do that. It goes flush, and then the break. All right. It is a nice short take up and a very crisp break. All right, so let me get a dot back on this guy and we'll take it out for testing and see just how much this Overwatch trigger does to our CZ P10.